The winter of 1847 came early to the Sierra Nevada mountains, and with it came a hunger that would transform men into creatures unrecognizable even to themselves. Samuel Hartwell had been a God-fearing man from Massachusetts when he joined the wagon train heading west. A schoolteacher by trade, he carried with him books, dreams of establishing an academy in California, and an unshakable faith in human decency. By the time the first snows trapped his party in the mountain pass, that faith would be tested beyond measure. "We should have listened to the warnings," whispered Martha Brennan, her lips cracked and bleeding from the cold. She clutched her youngest child, little Emma, who had stopped crying days ago, a silence more terrifying than any scream. The group of 47 settlers had made camp in a valley they believed would shelter them until the spring thaw. They were wrong. The snow fell in suffocating sheets, burying their wagons, their supplies, and eventually, their hope. The first to die was old Thomas Wade, who simply went to sleep one night and never woke. They buried him in the frozen ground, saying prayers over his grave. The second death came within a week, then a third. Soon, they stopped counting. "We have to consider it," James Keseberg said one night, his eyes hollow in the firelight. The German immigrant had always been practical to the point of coldness, but now his pragmatism carried a darker edge. "The cattle are gone. The leather from our boots is gone. We've eaten bark, roots, and our own belts. There's only one source of nourishment left." Samuel felt his stomach turn, though it was already twisted from starvation. "You can't mean—" "I mean survival," Keseberg interrupted. "I mean living to see California instead of becoming another corpse under this damned snow." The debate raged through the night. Some quoted scripture, others wept. But hunger is a beast that devours morality along with the body, and by dawn, a terrible consensus had been reached. They would use the bodies of those already dead, just to survive. Just until rescue came, Samuel refused at first. He wrapped himself in blankets and prayed, his breath forming clouds in the frozen air of the makeshift shelter. But prayer doesn't fill an empty stomach, and after watching Emma Brennan's small body carried out to join the growing collection of the dead, something inside him broke. The first taste was agony, not of the body, but of the soul. Samuel gagged, tears freezing on his cheeks. But he swallowed, and then he took another bite, and another. The transformation didn't happen all at once. It crept through the camp like the cold, insidious and unstoppable. At first, they only used the already dead. They told themselves this made it acceptable, necessary survival. But hunger is never satisfied. It only grows. William Foster was the first to cross the final line. His wife had been dead for 3 days when others noticed him lingering near her body with a knife, his eyes empty of everything except need. When confronted, he simply said, "She would have wanted me to live." But the truly horrifying change came when people stopped dying fast enough. Samuel first noticed it in the way some of the stronger men looked at the weaker ones. A calculating glance, a measurement. The sick and the children became livestock in their eyes, resources to be managed rather than lives to be protected. "Jacob's not going to make it through the night," someone would say, and others would nod with an eagerness that had nothing to do with mercy. Samuel tried to resist the thoughts that crept into his own mind. When he looked at young Timothy Ross, sick with fever and wasting away, he told himself he felt compassion. But underneath, something darker stirred, a cold arithmetic that calculated days of survival per pound of flesh. The rescue party finally arrived in late February, breaking through the snow to find a scene from nightmare. Of the 87 who were trapped, only 48 survived. Some died of exposure and starvation. Others had died of causes the survivors refused to explain. The rescuers found evidence that contradicted the survivors' claims of only consuming the already dead. There were signs of violence, of hunting. In Keseberg's shelter, they discovered a pot still containing human remains and a cache of stolen goods from other members of the party. But the most disturbing discovery was in the survivors themselves. Samuel Hartwell, the gentle schoolteacher, could barely speak coherent sentences. His eyes darted constantly as if searching for prey. When offered food, He ate with an animal intensity that made seasoned frontiersmen uncomfortable. Martha Brennan had survived, but something fundamental had broken inside her. She would sometimes call out for her daughter Emma, then stop mid-sentence and laugh, a sound devoid of humanity. The wagon train massacre, as it came to be known, sent shockwaves through the settlements. The survivors were treated with a mixture of pity and revulsion. Some tried to reintegrate into society, but the hunger had changed them in ways that couldn't be reversed. Samuel eventually made it to California, but he never established his school. He lived alone in a cabin far from any town, avoiding human contact. Neighbors said they sometimes heard him weeping in the night, crying out names of the dead. The mountains kept their secrets, but the survivors carried them everywhere. They had learned that civilization is a thin veneer, easily stripped away by deprivation. They had discovered that within every human lurks a monster, waiting for hunger, whether of the body or soul, to call it forth. The Wild West was built on the bones of those who didn't survive its harsh realities. But some fates were worse than death. Some survivors carried the wilderness inside them forever, a darkness that no amount of civilization could quite dispel. And on cold winter nights when the wind howled through the Sierra Nevada, some claimed you could still hear the sounds of that terrible winter. Not the cries of the dying, but something worse. The satisfied sounds of the feeding of humanity consuming itself in the name of survival.